Hi everybody, this is Scott Dudley from SaaS Startup Stories, and today my special guest is Maddy Agrawal, who's based in Lausanne, Switzerland. Maddy is the founder and CEO of Startup to Scale Up, which is an agency that helps B2B and SaaS founders scale fast with a scientific approach to marketing, funnels, tech automation, and sales team processes. Welcome to the show, Maddy. Are you ready to rock and roll?
I am. Thank you for having me, Scott.
You're welcome. All right, let's get stuck into it then. So we'll sort of start off with your background and what initially got you interested in working with B2B and SaaS companies.
Because I was a founder of quite a bit of SaaS companies myself. My story kind of started with I'm an engineer by education, and I started my career as a robotics engineer. But the last time I was working on a robotics engineering job, I was part of a team who was building next generation interplanetary rovers. So the kind of robots who go on the surface of Mars and the moons of Jupiter and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But then over a few years, a lot of life perspective change happened, which ended up me quitting my PhD, which I got into after the rover project.
Okay.
And so I quit my PhD, started my first startup, and then I went on to start several others. Three of them kind of became successful. We sold the last one end of 2018, beginning of 2019. So that was a decade of journey of founding a startup. So my robotics life, I call it my past life now.
Okay.
And there was a lot of learnings, and that was the whole transformation for me, becoming from an engineer to a sales and marketing person.
Okay.
Because you can build a lot of cool shit and useful things, but if you cannot sell it, nothing is gonna move.
Exactly.
And
yes.
And when I had that exit, I just said, okay, you know what? Let's just take a break. Let's not found another startup. And I started to get requests from several startup accelerators and startups themselves to help them with the challenges of marketing and sales. And I said, okay, let's start doing that. And that turns into its own business now after a couple of years. Right. So this is kind of why I got into SaaS, because most of the companies I founded or I was part of founding team were B2B SaaS.
So you obviously saw a fair bit of demand for your services, and that sort of prompted you to go in a different direction.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. So if we sort of fast forward to right now, tell us a bit about your company, Startup to Scale Up, a brief description of your methodologies to help SaaS founders scale.
So there is a lot of methodologies. Without going too much in details, if I put that into engineering terms, my job is debugger and a system architect when it comes to sales and marketing. I do believe sales is a science, and just like you design your product uh, and you engineer something that is tangible and useful, the same way you actually design your marketing and sales.
Okay.
And that's what we do, what I do, or what I help with startups who are through many different phases. That what is the reason? The debugging part is what is the reason they're not able to sell today? What's the struggle? Why they're not growing exponentially? Why every sale is being a uphill battle? And then how do we turn that into a system that is repeatable, predictable, and design a whole funnel, teams and processes and automation tools around it. So at the end of the day, your sales becomes like an assembly line. Like an assembly line, the raw material goes on one side, the product comes out on other side with predictable quality and quantity. That's how sales and marketing should look like at the end of the day. And that's the only way you can actually scale exponentially. Because just like setting up factories, once you have set up your one assembly line and it works, you can just replicate it.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. Makes sense. Yeah. I see. So for someone just starting out in SaaS, what would you recommend? Would you suggest looking into VC money to launch or possibly bootstrapping it instead? And what would you say are the pros and cons of both options?
Yeah, difficult question. Uh, too much money is not good for a startup. To give you an example, if you heard about a lot of innovation projects from big companies, I'm discounting Google and Amazon because they're really good at it. But most of the other companies where you see not entrepreneurs, but intrapreneurs, their project, they have too much money and resources, and their project keeps on dragging for years without any tangible output in most of the cases. So too much money is not good. Actually, a little bit starved is actually good, which forces you to innovate and look for other things rather than just, oh, we're not doing sales, let's just hire a marketing agency.
So out of the comfort zone, sort of what you mean.
Right.
Yeah.
So ideal way I look at it is, if you are building and there is also this other thing before I go into the ideal way, is that a decade or 2 decades ago, specifically, the question was more about, can you build it? Today, that question doesn't exist anymore. The question today is, can you sell it? We know you can build it.
Yes.
In most of the cases, of course, there are fringe cases, like if you're building a self-driving car or like a SpaceX, then the question is, can you build it? But that's like 0.0001% of the companies. Other companies, just the question is, can you sell it? So the way I look at it, the way you can grow your company fastest, and the way you can make most money, and way you can keep most control of your company, and don't let the investor dictate who you sell to, what you do, and so on and so forth, is to bootstrap first, get to a level where you can prove that you can sell predictably, then raise money to replicate to set up those 10 assembly lines in 1 year. So then you grow exponentially. If you bring VC money too early, then you have a lot of pressure of forcing progress. But that progress, which also comes into the product market fit and that kind of thing, that takes time, its own time. You cannot fake that progress. And once you started faking that progress, then you are much more likely and destined to die. It doesn't matter how much money you have. I mean, okay, yes, if you have, billions of dollars, that's a different story. Then you have a really long runway, but in normal scenarios. So I would be cautious about raising money, and I would be really looking for, like, okay, if I have a little bit more money, what does it actually help me achieve now, tangibly? I can spend more in marketing. That's not an answer to raise VC money from my perspective. My marketing is already working. I can generate a lead, $10 a lead. I need to generate 100 leads to become profitable. And I know where exactly in which ads I'm going to put that money. Okay, fine. That might be a reason, but I'm just going to hire salespeople because I cannot sell. That's not a reason to hire to get VC money. That's kind of how I look at it.
Okay, so say for example, if someone's bootstrapping and they've got a proven concept that is working, you would say that it's almost too difficult to really scale it up without that VC money, and if they just continue to bootstrap, it would be too slow to continue to progress. Is that what you're sort of saying?
In many cases, yes. If you bootstrap beyond a point, it will slow down your progress. And if you have cash influx, because ultimately in sales and marketing, you don't hire people after you have sales. You hire people in anticipation of a sale. But in order to hire somebody in anticipation of a sale, you need money now. But there are plenty of examples that counteracts that. Like Atlassian is a company that is completely bootstrapped. They raised money when they were already a giant company. So you don't have to raise money. It all depends on how your customers are coming up. What is your cost of acquisition? What is the lifetime value? So it's more about cash flow rather than, so raising money is more of a cash flow problem rather than we just need more money to run the company problem. Because in SaaS, you have a cash flow problem. You didn't have that problem 20 years ago when you just sell, the whole 3-year, 4-year license and you get paid up front and you don't care what happens to the customer. But now, because you're paying in subscription, your customer acquisition cost is now, but your revenue is coming later.
Okay, so speaking about cash flow, let's sort of talk about that for a bit, and why many startup companies end up running out of money, and maybe some strategies that you recommend to keep a young SaaS company alive in the early stages.
Right. So the company alive, I mean, one thing is a founder should always keep an eye on the runway and the burn rate. I have experience where that information should be on top of your head all the time, because every day you're spending is costing you. So how much days you have left in order to get some money in, that is ultimately is the decision that you have to take every day, because otherwise your company is going to die. You have a pre-fixed death date of your company.
How many days until you run out of money? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm
So
with you.
it's
Yeah.
like in real life, you know exactly which day you're going to die.
I see. Yeah.
So it's not a question of how you can prevent for the money. It's more about then, okay, so if I'm going to die that day, what I need to achieve by that day that I'm not going to die. How well can you define it now? The more well you can define it now, the better you can achieve it. The more vaguely you can define it now, the less chances are that you're going to achieve just that. So that's kind of how I see it. But then we can always go in more details about what does that mean, defining it. But I'll let you ask further question.
All right, yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get to that sort of shortly. What are your thoughts on product market fit and validating an idea so you're not wasting your time? We've sort of already covered this a little bit, but yeah, so what would you say about that?
So product market fit today has become a thing where everybody has its own definition. Um,
Okay.
and just Google it and you come up with 30 different definitions in the first
Yeah.
page
Okay.
of Google for product market fit. So it's really hard to say what does it product. So it's always about what does product market fit means for you. The way I look at it, it product market fit is not one stage, but it is a sequence of things you achieve, and then you achieve product market fit. So the first thing, for example, is it a problem solution fit? If it's a problem solution fit, then is it a solution customer fit? And if it is a solution customer fit, is it a customer channel fit? The way you're going to acquire your customers. Once all of that piece is put together, then you say, okay, I have a product market fit. I mean, I've met founders who have one customer and they say I have product market fit. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
you have a problem solution fit, and maybe you have a product customer fit, but definitely you don't have a customer channel fit. That's why you cannot have a product market fit at the moment. And ultimately, the way I look at it, the problem solution fit is, again, can you define the problem? Can you define the solution?
Yeah.
Customer product fit, can you define the product based on that solution? And then can you define the customer? How precisely can you define the customer? And so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I look at product market fit.
And customer channel fit, that's sort of like the last piece of the puzzle, isn't it? I guess that sort of comes by experimenting and just testing things out.
So there are two aspects of that. So one aspect is how good you understand your customer.
Yeah.
The better you understand your customer, the less experiments you have to run.
Yes.
Because if you already know where exactly your customer is, what does he read, what does he write, what does events he go to, does he read his email, is he on LinkedIn, is he active, and you can personify it, then you don't have to try out 10,000 different channels. You say, okay, we don't know if it's going to be, and it's also kind of depends sometimes on the stage. So I would look at the early stage when we're looking product market fit, but then channel product fit is going to change again. So to give you an example, I had we founded a company where we were selling to CXOs of Fortune 1000 consumer brands. So like CMO of McDonald's. Doesn't matter what channel we use, he's not giving us a time of the day because we were pre-revenue, right? So that's not happening. Doesn't matter what email we write, how good our messaging, what we can think about, and so on and so forth. That's not going to work. So we exhausted a few things, and then we say, okay, you know what? Let's see where they are available, and we studied schedule of where they go, and so on and so forth. And we realized, like, look, hey, they go to these conferences, and we have a list of conferences where these CMOs hang out, and they go to, and they are also the speakers. And we also realize when we look at the conferences in more detail that when they get out of the stage after speaking, they want to go hang out with their friends, but many people just want to talk to them, and they're not interested in talking to them people. They just want to go. So
Okay.
we employed this trick, like we'll just go to the person just comes in, he's surrounded by the crowd, and I'll just go cross the crowd and say, hey, John, how you doing, man? It's so long to see you. Do you want to smoke? He has no idea who the hell I am, but he understands. He's intelligent enough because we
Yeah.
are dealing with that kind of people. He said, this is my exit. And he say, hey, man, what's up? I got my 10 seconds,
Yeah.
or sometimes even 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? But then once we start to have that conversations, and when we realize, okay, we're kind of having a problem solution fit here because we really understand what motivates them. Our cold emails were having like 60% reply rate, not open rate, reply rate
Oh,
from
geez.
CXOs of Fortune 500 companies, because we just said one sentence in the email, hey, do you want to achieve that?
Okay. Interesting.
Let's have a talk.
Yeah.
But that was such a painful point that they were crying. They were giving them sleepless nights to these guys.
Yeah.
So they were like, anybody who comes up with something about this, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Then I'll figure out whether I wasted my time or not, but I want to talk to you.
Yeah, I see. Makes sense.
So the channel also changes. Sorry for going too long on this.
Yeah, no, interesting. I see what you're saying. So let's just say for a struggling SaaS founder, who's sort of trying hard to make things work, how do you know when it's time to stop, or if there's no point in moving forward, or do you keep persevering? What would you say for that?
I think it's again come back to the runway question,
Right.
like
Okay.
where you have to stop. That is the question.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what starts to happen is if you're a super early stage founder, you're still looking for that product market fit, right? Um, and discovery of the product market fit is not really a linear thing, although I present it as linear, but each step in itself is not linear. What I mean by that is you thought this is the problem and this is the solution. You go test out and you say, the customer says, no, I don't think I have a problem. I don't think I have this problem that you're talking about.
Okay.
Then you have to discover, like, okay, so I had the wrong assumption about the problem. So what is the real problem? Then you have to go back, design a solution, or define at least a solution for it.
Yeah.
And then you go test back again with 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, depending on which segment you are in. Just this question, like, do you have this problem? Because ultimately you cannot sell or do anything until a person thinks he has a problem,
Yes. Yeah.
specific one at that, right?
Yep.
So you can keep on going that iteration until you reach product market fit, theoretically speaking.
Okay.
Because I mean, some people call it pivot. I wouldn't call it pivot at this
Yeah.
stage. I would call it pivot when you're a little bit further down the road. um, um, but you're in a sense you're pivoting. So you can keep on pivoting until you find that Goldilocks zone where you say,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I have this problem.
Yep.
Theoretically, this solution sounds to me great. Then you have achieved problem solution fit. Then you move on to next stage, product solution fit. Oh, we cannot build this product because it's going to take $10 million to build this product, and the technology doesn't exist the way it can solve the problem in a way that the person is want to pay for it. Then you have to go back to the drawing board and say what other problem you have.
Yeah. I see.
So it
Okay.
comes down again to a runway question. But the key component is here is, can you define the problem you're solving without talking about your product? I would say that's a litmus test for
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
If you
Okay.
cannot define that, that means you cannot test it,
Yeah.
because now you're testing your product, you're not testing the problem.
Yeah.
If you cannot define the problem without ever mentioning the solution or the product.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So, in your opinion, what is the number one most important metric that early SaaS founders must watch like a hawk on a daily basis? So, obviously, there's lots of different metrics involved in the SaaS company, but what's the number one in your opinion?
So when you're starting out, number one is runway. Actually, runway is always a number one. Your burn rate and your runway. That should be on top of your mind all the time. Once you started to advance a little bit, then the churn rate is the first thing that's going to hit you. It's not
Right.
the cost of acquisition, it's not the lifetime value, it's the churn rate.
Okay.
That's going to kill you. At the same time, you have to, if you're starting to raise money, you have to look at what some VCs say, rule 40. Do you know about rule 40, Scott?
No, not yet. I've been doing a lot of
So
reading, but I
rule
haven't heard of
40
that one.
says your growth, the percentage of your growth rate plus the percentage of your profits uh, should be 40%.
Right.
So you might have 10% growth rate, 30% profit, or 20% growth rate, 20% profit. If it at least 40, then you're on a good path. If it's below 40, then you need to double check where is messing, where the things are messing up. So that means you're not ready for growth yet.
Okay.
That means there is something is still missing about the product, about the business model that is so fundamental that if
Yeah.
you dump money now to growth, there's something is going to break and it's going to snap.
So it needs tweaking. Yeah.
And then once you start to get over that and you have more customer, the third metric becomes most important, is the leading churn indicator. Is the indicator is without talking to the customer, just looking at the data, you can analyze this customer is going to churn in 10 days
Yeah, I see.
or 20
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
So it's not about, so churn is a lagging indicator. You only know when customers churn. But once you start accumulating data, then you should be able to say, okay, this customer is going to churn in next 10 days. So you have to define that metric. And this is like really different for every company, every product. There is no two companies who can have the same leading churn metrics. And then the question is, how can I reduce that time? So if a customer sign up today, and I would know after 3 weeks or a month, let's say, that this customer is going to churn in 1 week or not, how do I reduce that period to 2 weeks? How do I can know in 2 weeks that this customer is going to churn in 3 weeks now? Because that's going to be the gold mine where you're going to discover not only how to not make people churn, that means you increase your lifetime value, but the learning from this is going to reduce your customer acquisition cost in mid-term, if not in short term.
Okay. So it's sort of like a double whammy or double benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So from your experience, what are the most effective customer acquisition channels for a growing or a young SaaS company in terms of ROI?
Yeah, there is no most effective channel. It's again depends on what is the person you're selling to is using the channel. I have examples where the person is not on LinkedIn, doesn't read his email. He has an email account but never read his email, but he is buying on phone. You cold call him, and companies has grown to from zero to multi-million ARR in 1 or 2 years by selling on cold calls. I also have where it's impossible to get the number of the person. The whole persona is so secretified. It's kind of privacy oriented that you will never get his number. So you have to find other channels, either be it email, either be it something else. It's always there is no best channel. It just depends on who you are selling to.
Yeah, and obviously it would vary a bit between B2B and B2C as well, I guess.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It at the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing.
Yeah.
Where the person is spending his time that you're selling to, whether it's B2B or B2C.
Yeah, I see. You have to be clear on that. Okay. All right. So what about pricing and tiers? how should a SaaS founder decide on what prices are a good fit to balance both customer acquisition and profit at the same time?
So pricing is such a huge topic in its own way, so I wouldn't go in too much details because this is something we can have a separate podcast for.
Okay, a whole
Talk for
podcast.
hours, pricing itself.
Yeah.
But I'm going to touch upon, but I'm going to say this to summarize. I'm a huge advocate of value-based pricing. And I also see that value-based pricing is the only way you get out of, you can charge most. In 99% of the time, you can charge much more to a customer. You want to get out of all the anchors that a customer has in its mind. Anchors about competitors, anchor about alternative solutions, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And the best way to do that is do value-based pricing, but then it's not the easiest thing to do to quantify values that a customer is getting in every kind of product. But you, but but if you can do even some level of quantification, then it's exponentially can increase your you can increase your pricing without worrying about churn. The second thing is you really need to, like, this is something which I see very often, so I'm going to mention it. Doesn't apply to everybody. Is that the belief of that the founders themselves have anchors? Like, I cannot charge more than this because there is an external anchor, and I say that's just crap. It just doesn't matter. Like, for example, a common thing is when you have startups that are creating plugins to a platform. So they'll say, oh, but if the platform costs $100 a month per user, how can I charge $200 a month per user? I'm like, but the platform and your plugin are two different products. Even if you plug in into the platform, you can still charge 200 if you provide value worth of 1,000.
Yeah.
The platform itself is apparently not providing value worth 1,000.
Yeah, I see.
Without your plugin, right? So
yeah.
you need to get out of those own anchors and then take your customers out of those anchors.
What about looking at your competitors' prices, though? Do you think that's a good idea or not really?
For sure, because you need to understand what anchors customer have.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it again. This is part of understanding where customer is coming from.
Yeah.
Where is a prospect is coming from, and he's going to have this argument. If he's not going to have that argument with you, he's going to have that argument in his own head, or he's going to have that argument with his boss.
Yeah.
So if there is a huge difference between your competitor and your pricing, you need to understand that. You need to find reasons for that, like really good reasons. And then you have to be, in most cases, you have to be the one who brings that conversation that I know my competitors are cheaper, because you want to control that conversation, because there is a reason you're charging more.
Yes.
And that conversation is happening anyway. The only question is, does that conversation, do you have the control on that conversation, or his boss has the control on that conversation?
Good point.
If his boss has this, you're going to lose most of the time.
Yeah, true. Okay. All right. So what would you say are the most common mistakes that inexperienced SaaS founders make, in your opinion?
Most common ones. Again, it depends kind of on the stages. In the early stage, too much belief on the product, too much, because there is also there is also engineering bias, especially when we talk about SaaS startups, because most of them are founders are engineers, right, and programmers.
Yeah.
So they look at, sometimes the vision can be very narrow. So for example, you say, okay, so this is actually a real example. I'm not going to go in the whole example, but I'm going to just shrink it down to one point where we thought we're increasing the productivity of employees. And we actually made sales at much higher price point than we even thought possible. And for me, I don't know, I'm just a nerd in that sense, that I need to know why they bought for 100K when we went there to get a 10K deal.
Okay.
Why did we end up having 100K deal? So after 3 months and so on, I started looking into it, and I had further suggestions how we can improve the pricing. So went back to the decision maker, say, hey, I have another thing I can increase even more productivity, and that's why it's going to benefit you more. And I was like, not saying it, but kind of hinting that we can increase pricing. And he's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. If you have free time, do it. I'm like, but it's going to increase your productivity. And he says, if the person can do the 8-hour job in 6 hours, I don't have more work to give him. Neither I can fire anybody at this stage. Neither I'm hiring anybody at this stage for next 3 years. But I have this completely different thing that you're actually saving money me on. If you can increase that, then I can increase your prices.
Yeah.
I'm happy to even double and triple your prices.
Yep.
Right. So sometimes it's a very clear cut and nice example, just because to give an example in a short period of time. But there are very nuances where you think this is the value you provide. I had another example where there is a company with a founder coming from technical background think, okay, my SaaS can increase production, but they don't care about increasing production, but they were still buying. But every sale was still uphill battle, because he was selling for production, but they were using it for something else.
Okay.
So once you realize that they're actually using it for something else, then things starts to get easier. So I think from early stage point of view, this is the biggest mistake. Once you start having customers, the biggest mistake is you're not ready. You haven't. So you focus too much on efficiency and not in effectiveness in early stages of growth, and you try to just push the growth and fake it. But then you don't fake it for external people. You also start drinking your own Kool-Aid. It's like the example I gave is like, if you have to go 100 kilometers in a car, the first thing is, can it go 100 kilometers? We'll talk about how much gas it's going to use later, but does it even start?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the effectiveness versus efficiency. So there is too much emphasis then, once you start to have customers, too much on how do we optimize it? How do we make it more efficient? Rather than saying, okay, how do we make it more predictable? How do we make it more effective? And once you have that predictability and effectiveness into it, then you can do all kind of efficiency games on it. So these are like, if we think about early stage, this is, I think, is the most common ones, I would say. I see.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So what are you curious about or researching right now regarding SaaS and digital marketing in general?
Not per se digital marketing, because I mean, there are a few new things coming up, but yeah, this is new packaging for the same concepts. But the new, I'm right now looking more deeply into revenue optimization. There is the job of chief revenue officer. Because there are a lot of new tools and applications and so on that are coming up for SaaS revenue optimization. So that's definitely an interesting topic. It's still pretty new, comparatively speaking. And most of the, I mean, it's not really for super early stage startups. It's for still that you have some customer. Otherwise, what you're gonna do with the revenue optimization or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So once you start having some revenue, once you start to reach, 500,000, 1 million ARR, then you start to need to think about it. And that's something I'm researching, that new tools and new processes that have been developed.
Nice. Cool. All right. So just to wrap up, where can people go to find out more about your company, Startup to Scale Up?
Startuptoscaleupnow.com, or on my LinkedIn profile, which I'm sure Scott is going to put somewhere.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for sure.
Perfect.
Excellent. All right, then. Thanks for being on the show, Maddy. I really appreciate your time. That was awesome value. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Okay, then. Bye.